Okay, so you're working on your Rails side project and it's almost done. Awesome. But before you can cash in on that sweet, sweet SaaS money, you have to actually have a live web app, right? Deploying is a major part of the app development process, and with Rails 8, I'm going to show you how to get your app on a live production server just like this. I have my whole entire app up and running in production with the latest and greatest that Rails 8 has to offer. And guess what? It's super easy. There's no platform as a service involved. There's no Heroku, no nothing. You can just provision some hardware literally anywhere, and deployment is incredibly simple. In fact, I have a new change that I want to deploy to production right now. Let me go ahead and do that. So that's all it took to deploy my app to production. I can go back to my production environment, hit refresh, and there we go. That is the new code right here, this little kitten picture. Meow. But that's all you need. Rails 8 has amazing deployment capabilities with Kamal, so let's get into it. Throughout this series on Rails, we have been building an application together. This app is a task management app, and it's pretty straightforward, but we have a lot of investor interest, so we're definitely gonna make some money for sure. But all joking aside, if you wanna follow along, check the GitHub link in the description below. And throughout this series, we've been adding the latest and greatest that Rails 8 has to offer in an application. But now that we have all the functionality in our app that we wanna ship with, we're ready to ship. But how do we ship? Well, we have to provision a server and deploy our code. And in this episode, we're going to show just how easy this is with Kamal, and for our example, a DigitalOcean droplet. Now, I'm not going to go over the details of configuring the droplet by hand because that's not the point of this video. This video is about deployment strategies you can use in Rails 8 and not hosting strategies, but I will show off the droplet I made, and well, here it is. This is a very typical droplet that you would have on DigitalOcean. I have a droplet right here that is only 2 GB of RAM. Now remember, we don't need a lot of RAM because we're not using Redis and we're not using RAM to cache things for us. We are not using any of that stuff because we're using the solid trifecta, which moves all of that stuff from the RAM data store to an actual database on our hard drive. And so we don't actually need that much RAM. If you want to refer to the solid trifecta episodes, those are also in this series right here. So please check out those as well. But suffice to say, we don't need to use a lot of RAM. Then we also have a database cluster that is attached to this droplet. And this database cluster, again, is pretty small. It's just 1 gig of RAM and 10 GB of disk space. That should be enough until, of course, we get on the front page of Hacker News. And speaking of solid trifecta, because we're using so much database stuff, we actually also attached a new volume to this droplet. It is called volume NYC102, and it is 100 gigabytes. And that's all we're using here for this application, and it's probably all we're gonna need for a pretty long time. So now that we have our droplet set up, we can start configuring Kamal to deploy this bad boy. But first, what the hell is Kamal? Before we talk about Kamal, let's talk about a little bit of history here. Over the past decade plus, deploying web apps has become easier thanks to platforms like Heroku, Fly.io, Render, Vercel, you name it. However, these services often lock you in to cloud resources at a premium, which poses a challenge for those who want the flexibility or to migrate to their own hardware. Now, Kamal addresses this by bringing the user-friendly experience of these platforms to any deployment setup. Essentially, Kamal is a deployment tool that utilizes Docker and streamlines the process of deploying to your own hardware, whether it's in the cloud like DigitalOcean like we just showed, or a physical server that you own. All you need is Kamal and an unprepared Ubuntu server that you can SSH into, and you could be deploying in minutes. And this is an essential part of the Rails 8 theme. No PaaS, no platform as a service. Rails 8 is truly enabling developers to take their apps from hello world to IPO, and deploying your code is a major part of going IPO. So let's configure Kamal in our Rails application and deploy this thing to production, shall we? Now, Kamal actually doesn't really need a whole lot of configuration in order to deploy to production. As I said before, all you really need is an unprepared Ubuntu server that you can SSH into, and that's what we have with our DigitalOcean droplet. So let's start configuring Kamal so we can deploy to this droplet. Now, the configuration for Kamal lies in config deploy.yaml. This is the thing that controls what Kamal does. And you can see it's actually fairly nicely commented. We can see all these comments kind of describe the different sections and the different keys and attributes that we will be mentioning here. Now, the very first part of this is the name of the service. This is the thing that you want to name essentially your containers that you build from the Docker file. If you remember, we actually talked about our Docker file in another episode, but Rails ships with a Docker file that is perfectly tuned to deploy to production. So by default, Rails 8 has a Docker file that Kamal is going to use to build into an image and then run as a container Planner on a server that you specify. So this is the Docker file that we are building using Kamal. The service we are going to call something simple like Life Planner, because I'm not very creative. And then the name of our image is a very particular thing. We want to name it after our username on Docker.io, and let's name it Life Planner, just like the name of our service. Now, as I said, Kamal uses Docker to deploy to our server, but how do we get our image onto our server? Docker will use a server registry. By default, that is Docker Hub. So if you sign up for an account with Docker Hub, my account is Typecraft, it will push my images to my account on Docker Hub and then pull them down onto the server that we are then deploying to run our application as a container. Next, this line on line 10 here specifies the IP address of the server we are deploying to. For us, that is 64.227.16.33. I will copy this from DigitalOcean and just paste it right in here. Easy peasy. And there's some interesting commented out lines here that specify if you have your job queue hosted on another service somewhere else, that you can specify it here. We don't worry about that right now. It's all in line for us. Next, down here at the proxy key, we can enable SSL auto certification via Let's Encrypt, and this will happen automatically for us. So if we set SSL to true and we have a host, this will enable SSL certification automatically. And for us, we actually have a DNS that we are pointing to this IP address at life-planner.typecraft.dev. Now I'm going to take this down after this video, so don't try figuring this out. It's not going to be there. This will give us SSL certification via Let's Encrypt on the host lifeplanner.typecraft.dev. Next, we want to specify our registry. And again, the default registry is Docker Hub. You could also use GitHub. There's also a DigitalOcean registry for containers. You can figure out what you like to use, but Docker Hub is pretty easy and straightforward, and that's what I'm using in this video. So my username for Docker Hub is Typecraft, and our password is Kamal registry password. Well, what is this? You see, this is an environment variable that actually gets injected into Kamal from a file called .kamal secrets. Let's check that out right now. If we open up .kamal/secrets, we can see that we have some basically commented out stuff and some examples of what a Kamal registry password environment variable would be, and our Rails master key. So what is our Kamal registry password? Well, it's the password that you would use to authenticate through Docker Hub. In our example, we're using Docker Hub through its CLI. And for me, if I'm logged into Docker Hub, I can actually go to my account settings and I can manage my personal access tokens in this section right here. And this is where I actually generate a personal access token that I'm using for Docker Hub. Now, where do I store this token? I mean, we could just inline it right here and we could just as a string put down our token, but that's not really what we want to do. Typically in a production environment, and what I've seen throughout many jobs throughout my career, especially lately, is you want to store these special variables in a shared password registry. And when deploying this application, I don't want to just show you something hacked together. I want to show you how I would do it in actual production environment. So I actually have in my 1Password password registry, I have already created a blank production password key under the keys vault in my account. And I already saved my Kamal registry password. Again, this was the special key that I created on Docker Hub. That is my Kamal registry password. The Kamal registry is Docker Hub. This is the password that I'm using. Now, if I click on edit here, I can just show you really quick. This is the key for that. I also have my Rails master key, which I'll probably change, but we'll get there in a second. And now that our password is stored in 1Password, how do we actually get it into Kamal? Well, we can see in our secrets file that we actually have a very interesting comment right here. This is an example, but it's actually very close to what I'm going to use. Kamal actually gives you in its CLI a special ability to fetch passwords from different adapters. One that they include here for an example is 1Password, which is part of the reason why I'm using 1Password. And you can actually fetch these keys from your 1Password account to use in Kamal, which is kind of amazing and super convenient. So for me, I'm just going to edit this line really quickly. My account is not your dash account. I have already authenticated through 1Password through its CLI. All those steps I think are out of scope for this video, but because I've authenticated and I'm using 1Password CLI, I could just type op account list and this will give me my user ID. And this user ID is what you want to use for your 1Password adapter in this file. Now, again, this is an account I created specifically for this video, so I'm pretty comfortable showing you these keys and this ID. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to show you. So we can go up here, we can actually just paste our user ID in place of your account. And from vault item, we can see back in 1Password, we are in the vault of keys, and the item is called production. So our vault is keys, and our item is capital P, production. That's just how we named our vault and the item that these keys are stored within. And we can see here also that we are fetching our Kamal registry password and our Rails master key. I will show you really quickly how to create your Rails master key. We're not quite there yet, but we will just leave this part in here. And then below this, you can see that's commented out. Our Kamal registry password could be set to the output of Kamal secrets extract Kamal registry password from the secrets variable that we set on the previous line. Pretty cool. So this right here should automatically fetch out to 1Password, get these keys from that vault in the item that I showed, and set the Kamal registry password env variable based on that key. So now I'll just clean up this file just a little bit more. I think I can just delete all these lines below, and that should be good here. Okay, so back to our deploy.yaml file. We just set our Kamal registry password through 1Password, which is fantastic. Chef's kiss. Mwah. And let's move down. We see in another section here, this is where we inject certain env variables into our Rails application, and one of them that we want is our Rails master key. Now, really quickly, if we want to create a new master key for our application for production, all we have to do is type in Rails credentials :edit and specify in the environment flag that this is for production. Now this will open up a new credentials file for production, and it will also create a new key that you can use to unlock this credentials file. And where is this key stored? Well, it's stored in config credentials production.key. And this is the special key that we can use to unlock our credentials on our production environment. And this is the key that you would want to absolutely store in 1Password, and we can update our Kamal secrets file to show this. And that is the same key that we saved in 1Password already under Rails master key. This is our production key used to unlock our configuration for production environment. So now if we go back to our Kamal secrets file, we want to uncomment this line right here that specifies our Rails master key, which is set to extract Rails master key from the secrets that we created up here. Now this is, again, you can see it's this key, Rails master key, that we're extracting from the secrets that we fetched up here. Pretty straightforward, right? It's kind of awesome. Now there's one more very specific thing we have to do because we're using DigitalOcean with a separate database host. What we want to do is down here, uncomment out the DB host line, and we want to change this to a new environment variable that we're going to call DB_host. Now, if we go back to DigitalOcean, we can see in our database cluster, we click on that and we look at our connection string. This is the connection that we can make to our database. It includes the username and password in this string. Again, I'm going to delete this later, so I don't mind showing you guys this. This is a great example, and I just want to make sure you all see how I would do this in an actual production environment. We can copy this string, and when it's copied, what we do is once again, we go to 1Password and we specify our DB host. And again, I already saved this. This is what the string looks like, and this is already saved. So now what we can do is we can inject this environment variable into Kamal through Kamal secrets, and it's fairly straightforward. All we have to do is add a new line below Rails master key, specify this as DB_host, and the extract, we want to extract the DB_host key from our vault. And up here at the top, we also want to make sure that we are fetching DB host from the original query for all the keys using Kamal secrets fetch. So these are all the environment variables that we're going to be injecting into Kamal when we deploy. And if we move down here past the aliases key, which we will show off in a second, we see that there's a volumes line. Now this is really great to have here because, as I said before, on DigitalOcean, I also attached a volume to this droplet because we're going to be using a lot of database space because we're using solid trifecta to do our caching, our queuing for jobs, and our WebSocket messaging through solid cable. And so if we go to DigitalOcean and we click on our volume, we can see here that it is named volume NYC02. So I will copy that value and place it down here. And I will delete the rest of the example. One thing to note that on DigitalOcean, there's dashes in this name, but on the actual droplet, when you SSH into it, this is named with underscore. So I want to change those dashes to underscores. I'm not sure how that happens on DigitalOcean, but it's just something I found when writing the script for this video. So basically what this does is it mounts this volume to the Rails storage folder. And we know that our SQLite databases, if we open up config database.yaml, our SQLite databases are being stored in storage. So this is going to be under Rails storage. And so that's why we want to mount the volume right here, because it's going to give us all that extra space using this volume for our Rails storage. And believe it or not, that's actually all the configuration we need for Kamal to deploy this app. But there's just a little bit more we have to do. You see, this whole entire series, we have been configuring things to work with development, but we haven't yet configured our database for production. So let's do that really quickly right now. We can see in our database.yaml file, we have a really great configuration for the solid trifecta for our development environment. We have cache, cable, and queue. And I'm actually going to copy this and move down to my production key so that we can check out the configuration here. Now, for production, we started off with this application using Postgres. So it's actually already configured the way I would almost want it, but we're just going to change a couple of things. First of all, we want to make sure that we're using SQLite and not PostgreSQL for our solid trifecta. So I'm just going to paste what I stole up above from our development configuration. I'm going to delete the stuff that I don't want around. And at the end of the day, all I really want to do with this configuration is change the word development, because that's just the name of our database. Wouldn't make sense to name our database development when it's on production. So let's just change that to production. And there we go. So now our database for SQLite is under the storage/life task planner production SQLite 3 files. And this is for our solid trifecta. Again, that's solid cache, solid cable, and solid queue. Next, there's just one more thing I want to configure for our database. Now remember, we actually have a managed database cluster on DigitalOcean. So if we go back, we can see our database cluster is right here. We don't want to use a DB password and username here. We actually want to use the URL for this cluster on DigitalOcean. So let's delete this username and password. Instead of username and password, we actually want to have a URL key, and the value for this key is actually in our credentials file, the DB URL attribute. Now, this isn't us injecting environment variable into Kamal. This is our actual application's credentials. So we should edit our credentials file for production to add this DB URL key. So let's do that right now. If you remember, we already created our production configuration for credentials. So if we type bin Rails credentials, edit environment. Environment's a weird word to say. Environment? Anyways, our production environment, we want to enter these configuration files and type db_URL, if I can type that correctly. And the value for our database URL comes from the value that we saw in DigitalOcean, or also the thing that we stored in 1Password. So I can just copy that database URL and paste it just like that into our production credentials. Okay, so now we have everything all set up. The environment variables are being injected correctly, and we have all of our attributes set in our Kamal deployment configuration file. And what do we do now? Well, if everything's all set, all we really need to run is Kamal setup. So what does Kamal setup do? Well, it's going to do a bunch of things. It's going to SSH into the server that we specified. It's going to install Docker on that server if it doesn't already exist. It's then going to clone our repository. It's going to build the image out of the Docker file that we have in our repository. It's then going to push that image up into our Docker Hub account at Typecraft, and then it's going to pull it down and run the container. And then our application is going to be done. It's going to be running. That's all we need to do. So once again, we run Kamal setup and hit enter. And we see here Kamal is going to install Docker on this server. It's going to build a new image, push it up to Docker Hub, pull it back down, run this as a container, and when it's all said and done, our app should be deployed. Okay, and that's all you need. So now we specified that this app is going to live at lifeplanner.typecraft.dev, and here we are. This is our application. It has now been deployed to DigitalOcean using Kamal. That's super easy. And Kamal can do so many other things too. If we ever have a new change that has currently been merged into master, all we have to do is type Kamal deploy, and that will do almost all the same things that Kamal setup will do, except it's already going to assume that you have Docker installed and running. It's going to create a new image based on the main branch, and then it's going to actually run that image as a container on the server, thus replacing the previous code you had before. You can also do some other cool stuff like type Kamal console, and that will actually log you into a Rails console on the application server so that you can interact with all the things in your console that you would want to interact with. I currently have one task created. That's pretty cool. You can also manage your actual server by typing Kamal shell, and this will drop you into a shell in your server as well, which is also very nice. And there's just a lot of things you can do. You can type Kamal logs, and this will actually tail all the logs from your production environment. And it's just awesome. It just feels like home. It's so easy to use. Kamal is an amazing deployment tool. It's very easy to understand. It doesn't take very long to set up, and with just a little bit of configuration, as you saw here, we can deploy to a brand spanking new Ubuntu server anywhere. And Kamal really handles everything. As we said before, throughout this series, Rails 8 aims to be a full-fledged one-person framework from writing code to deployment. Rails 8 makes it super easy to go from hello world to IPO, and with the deployment taken care of, we don't have to worry about an expensive platform as a service. In this series, we made an app and deployed it to production, all within Rails 8. Rails 8 has literally all the tools you would need to be a one-person framework. So get out there and explore all that Rails 8 has to offer. You might build something really amazing. And hey, thanks nerds.